Hey guys, today I'm going to go over how to wire up your Profiler EFI module from Davis Technologies. So before we get into any of the software, which I'm not going to cover in this video, I am going to show you how to wire it and make it all work. So this is Profiler software. We're not going to look at this today, but we are going to look at how to make it work with Holley. So your Profiler EFI module, just like this. You've probably seen this floating around before, Profiler. Well, Shannon now makes an EFI module for the past few years that removed some of the add-on things that you don't need with a fuel injection system and brought the cost down a little bit. So I've sold quite a few of these lately, and I've had a couple of customers kind of ask me questions about how to wire it. I figured it's a lot easier to just make a video and help everybody all at once. So we'll get into it. The Profiler EFI module will come with this. So this is a pinout for all of your connections. And if you own one of these, you've got this piece of paper probably sitting in front of you. I do this. I just did this. I put this together to kind of show you what's what. And we're going to go over it step by step here while I go through the software in Holley to show you how to integrate it. So, and if you look at the Profiler TC3 series instructions, this is also an advanced install that Shannon wrote up. I do not do it this way because I like to put them all on J4. So that's why I'm going to show you how I do it. It makes it for a little bit cleaner of an install and less, multiple connections or multiple connectors being used to one similar device. I like to try to make everything as a harness so that you can plug it in here, plug it into your TC3 or your Profiler EFI module and your VPS all in one. So first thing we got to do, we go into Holley software and we're going to have to create some inputs. What you'll have to do is go into Toolbox, add individual config. You're going to have to add the IO. Just use the base blank. I've already got one up, so I'm not going to add it. So you'll add that. You'd hit open. And you'll also do it again and add traction and check default. So there we go. We hit cancel. So this is your input output ICF, and this is your traction ICF. You guys probably already are aware of both of them, or maybe just the input output ICF, but let's go over the traction ICF first. So when we get into the traction ICF, it asks you, what is the system type? So is it a TC1 or TC2, the older units from Davis? Is it a Profiler or TC3? Or is it a Profiler TC3 with Smart Drop? Or is it internal active speed management with Holley? So for this scenario, we're going to use Profiler TC3 with Smart Drop. And we're going to do a TC switched enabled input. What this is a literal switch in the car that once you turn it on, it allows traction control to actually function. I like to use this on a lot of cars because sometimes you don't necessarily want traction control on. Maybe it's a street car and you don't want it, or whatever it may be. So I like to have a button or a switch for it. So we just enable that. The next thing we're going to have to do is create some inputs and outputs. Now, when you enable the traction ICF and you select Profiler TC3 with Smart Drop, it's going to automatically create these two inputs right here, Smart Drop input and the Profiler input. The Profiler input is your timing retard or advancement. So those will automatically be populated by selecting the Profiler /TC3 with Smart Drop system type. We're going to add a few things to this. So we'll go to I/O. First thing we need to do is we need to add the Driveshaft Speed that's coming from the Profiler EFI module. So what you need to understand is, we're going to go to my Excel spreadsheet. The path of information is Driveshaft Speed sensor, goes directly to the Profiler EFI module to pin 4, and then it gets outputted from the Profiler EFI module for data logging purposes into your Holley from pin 11. So that's Driveshaft Speed to ECU, right? So it goes, this is why this is in red. This is important. This one will go straight from the Driveshaft Speed sensor right into the Profiler EFI module. It doesn't go to the ECU first and then to the Profiler EFI module, all the way around. It goes straight to the Profiler EFI module, and then it outputs from the EFI module to the ECU. So when we look at that, we need to create an input so we have the Driveshaft Speed from the Profiler EFI module. I made another input named TC arm switch, and I made it a 12 volt. If we look over here on our pin map, what I did was our TC enable that gets automatically populated with the clicking of this button, right? I dropped my TC arm switch onto the same input. So the reason you do this is because we have to set an arm switch out to the Profiler EFI module. And I like to be able to use, hey, this switch has to be on plus another condition, which I'm going to show you once we get to the output side of it. Side note, as you can see, everything for a VPS and a Profiler EFI module all fits on to J4 with some room to spare. Hence the reason why I do things this way as opposed to using some of J2A and some of J2B. Here's your outputs that we use. So we have our Driveshaft Speed from the Profiler EFI module into the ECU. We have our arm switch. We've talked about that. These here are internal inputs. What these are is for data logging purposes. So when we pull up a data log in Holley, I want to have a definitive number given to me of how much retard was being applied to make it down the racetrack on my data log in Holley. In order to do an internal input, we go to configure. Well, I'm sorry, first you select internal, right? And then we will go, so TC retard, configure, let's click here, we scroll down until we get to the traction control area, and TC timing retard. So what that's going to do is tell you the number of degrees that were retarded from the profiler. Okay, so the profiler is sending 2 signals out to the, well, a total of 3 signals out to the ECU. First signal is a timing retard. The second signal is a smart drop signal. And then the third signal is your Driveshaft Speed. So we create 2 internal inputs. I make another one called TC Smart Drop. It's internal. We configure it, TC Profiler Smart Drop. Lets us know how many cylinders it's dropping in order for us to get down the racetrack. Once we have our inputs created, let's create our outputs. So the Profiler EFI module requires very little power to run. So we can power and ground the device straight from the ECU. So what I do with a lot of these small devices like this and sensors and whatnot is I create 2 outputs, one for 12 volt, one for ground. So Profiler 12 volt, Profiler ground. We turn them on when the battery is above 8 volts. Pretty simple, right? So once the battery is above 8 volts, as in once the ECU is on, we're turning on the Profiler. Same thing with the ground. Battery above 8 volts. When I wire up a Profiler or TC3 and the Driveshaft Speed, I give this 12 volt and this ground from the ECU, and it will power the Profiler EFI module and the Driveshaft Speed sensor from the same pin. Okay, so it'll come out of J4B3 and J4B1, and it will go to the Profiler on pin 1 and pin 8, and it'll also go to my Driveshaft Speed sensor. So when the ECU gets turned on, the Driveshaft Speed sensor gets turned on, and so does the Profiler EFI module. All right, next output is trans brake. So the Profiler EFI module, in order for it to work properly, needs to see the trans brake signal. So what we do is we set up an output called Profiler, Profefi trans brake, and we configure it, and we're going to make this output active while the trans brake is enabled. Okay, so this output will activate when trans brake is enabled. So when the EFI module sees the trans brake, and then it sees the release of the trans brake, it starts the run curve. Otherwise, it would have no idea where to start from. So simple, easy, nice and clean. So we make a harness that goes from our J4 connector to the Profiler EFI module, build it on the bench, plug it in. Go back, and now we need our arm switch. So our arm switch is a 12 volt. We're going to configure it. This is going to be configured with that the output will go active when the TC arm switch is enabled and the TPS is above 75%. So it will send a 12 volt signal from the ECU to the Profiler EFI module to tell it to be in like armed mode. Okay. Now we go back over to our pin map. We've got all of these here. I've already pinned these just to give you an example, but we've got smart drop input, profiler input, Driveshaft Speed from Profiler EFI module, and then the TC enable, which was pre-canned from the traction control ICF, and the TC arm switch, which is the input that I made so that we had a reference point to create our output. If we go to view outputs, we have profiler ground, profiler arm, profiler trans brake, profiler 12 volt. So that's it when it comes to wiring. Now let's go over it one more time with my little Excel spreadsheet. So if we look at this Profiler EFI module pin number, and let's reference, let's do this. Bear with me here. There we go. So we reference this, okay? And notice the picture. So look at the connector, hold the connector in your hand, and you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Profiler EFI module pin number 1, right? Which is up here, pin number 1. Wire color is red. It's battery positive. For my diagram, the way I do it, it goes to J4B3, and the function is power. Number 4, right here, white, driveshaft RPM in. Notice it's all background in red because it has nothing to do with the ECU. It doesn't go to the ECU. Notice it says direct from driveshaft speed sensor. Then we go to pin 5 right here, orange with black stripe, trans brake sync in. That is our output we created to tell the Profiler EFI module that we're on the trans brake. Color of wire is orange with black, trans brake signal input, J4B4. Next, we've got our arming switch, like we talked about, in pin number 6, and y'all are welcome to screenshot this little thing that I made, or I don't really know how to post it up in the YouTube link, but I guess if you absolutely need this thing and you can't just watch my video, I can send it to you. So you just carry on. It's a very simple installation. It's very minimal wiring involved. It's actually a pretty straightforward install. So again, pin 8 is our ground. It's coming from J4B1. The wire color is black. There we are on pin 8, black wire color, battery ground. Pin 11, driveshaft speed to ECU. This is the output that we created right here. So something I want to make note of, the stuff that's in like gray background, like the light colored background on this diagram, is optional future use, included but not installed in connector. So be cautious of when you are pinning those wires into the connector. Make sure you hear a nice positive click when you put the pin into the connector. You'll see that the pins are very small, and they can be a little bit of a pain to make sure that they are actually locked into place. So just make sure that when you're pinning them, when you're poking them in there, and when he sends you these, it's a lead of wire that's already crimped onto the pin. So you don't have to crimp anything. You just have to shove it in there, okay? And that's about it. That's really all that it takes to wire up one of these things. Once you have it wired up, refer back to me here in probably the next day or so, and I'm going to make a kind of a setup startup video on how to get your Profiler EFI module set up and functioning before you go out and make your first pass with it. So hopefully this answers some of your wiring questions about a Profiler EFI module. To all my customers that I actually made this video for, if y'all have any questions about how to wire it up, you guys already know how to get a hold of me. Hopefully this answers everybody else's questions, or takes away a little bit of fear when it comes to installing something like this. So again, very, very basic, very straightforward. Use your pin map, pay attention to where you've pinned things, and you'll be in good shape. So, all right, see you guys later.